Welcome back to the Metropolitan Virtual Playhouse. We are so happy to be back both here online and in person in preparation for our upcoming production of The Sea Lady, a play by Neith Boyce based on a story of the same name by H.G. Wells. Boyce wrote this play in 1935 and it was headed to Broadway, but Wells's agent pulled the rights before it could premiere. Almost 100 years later, thanks to suggestions from our friends David and Fred Hapgood, both descendants of Neith's husband and creative partner Hutch Hapgood, and Carol DeBoer Langworthy, Boyce's biographer, The Sea Lady is about to make its world premiere at Metropolitan. In the play, a mermaid swims ashore in Victorian England in search of a soul. Her dream of finding new life on land enchants Mrs. Bunting, socially striving matriarch of the family that adopts her. But she has another message for restless young politician Harry Chatteris, that there are better dreams than the life that he knows. Today we're joined by the actors playing both Harry and Mrs. Bunting, as well as director Alex Rowe, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
As many of the audience will know, I'm Alex Rowe. I'm the artistic director of Metropolitan Playhouse and have been since 2001. And I'm also directing this production of The Sea Lady.
I'm Dexter McKinney, and I will be portraying Harry Chatteris. And this is my first go round at the Metropolitan Playhouse.
Hi, my name is Laura Pruden, and I play Mrs. Bunting. And I'm having a lot of fun playing on the shore in the world of The Sea Lady.
Excellent. Thank you for being here. As we and many of our regular Metropolitan Virtual Playhouse viewers and audience members know, the Metropolitan Playhouse is all about discovering our present through the past. And I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about what the relevance of this play, The Sea Lady, is to our current circumstances.
Want me to kick that one off?
Yes, please.
I'm happy to do it. I was thrilled with this play, which was sent to me by one of the descendants of the family of the author. That was David Hapgood, and it was many years ago, and he had received it from Carol DeBoer Langworthy, who's a scholar at Brown University. And to my shame, it was some years ago, but Carol thought that this was a play that really deserved to be seen, and Carol saw that it was both stage worthy and might speak to us now. And at the time, because of its H.G. Wells progeny, it's an English setting, and our being an American focused theater, I didn't quite see the virtue in it. But I looked at it again during the pandemic, and with more knowledge of the author, I really saw that she was approaching themes that were very meaningful to her and the company, both the theater company that she helped found, the Provincetown Playhouse, which many of our audience know very, very well now. But also the thoughts, the trends in American thought of philosophical and social that are working for us again, almost over 100 years after it was originally written, but a little under 100 years after she actually worked on the script. And those have to do with the choices we're confronted with in our day-to-day life because of the society we live in and because of who we are in that society, both what it expects from us and demands of us and what it won't let us do. In fact, in many ways, it resonates all the more strongly for us now, can I say, than it did in 1935. I wasn't there, I shouldn't say that, or in 1901. But you had both authors, H.G. Wells and Neith Boyce, were really questioning the social order, social class, and hierarchies that restricted. In her case, it was largely focused on not only on women in the society. In his case, it had much more to do with, I would say, conventions of marriage and union and sexuality, but also the underclass, the workers versus the aristocracy in England. And I think now we find all of us saying, well, what's my role in the world? Do I have to accept the boundaries around me because of my immigration status, my race, my gender identity, my my history of work, or on the other hand, my position as the enforcer or even overseer of a workplace, or rules that I begin to question. It's been so meaningful in the pandemic, obviously, for many of us. Um, and the play seems, because it is asking, is there another way to live? Do you need to accept the boundaries that you're within? Um, Suddenly has a whole new uh, meaning and, relevance. The dread word relevance, for us now in this particular moment.
I find it's fascinating when people ask me, so what's the play about? Like, is it a comedy? Is it? And I sort of say, well, it's a social commentary, comedic social commentary, which is, I thought, sufficient. But as we've explored the play more and more, it's interesting because it really is multifaceted. So yes, it has a social commentary aspect, absolutely. Excuse me. And I think the idea of like sort of social gatekeepers, and even though it is set in England and it very much is attached to the class system there, it relates to what we have here. There are people who are always trying to buy their way in, gain access, right, to what they see as the next level, or whatever is out of reach for them, which sometimes can be what to the outside eye would seem like a step down. Like someone wants to have more street cred. They want to have, there's always sort of that, you want that entree into the other. So that's interesting. But then I think also this idea that I didn't see at first, that is pervasive, of the problem of the sea lady actually being another being, and her world being literally inaccessible, is fascinating. And also the idea of what role sort of spirituality or religion plays in that. And then also this idea of like, I don't know why today I was thinking about even humans who push the boundaries of like what's acceptable for the human body, like people who free dive, or people who free climb mountains, right? And they do it again and again and again until they frequently perish. Yeah. Because we're not built for that. And so I just find it all very fascinating, this sort of the allure of our refusal to believe anything's impossible, right? Somehow we have this hope springs eternal, for better or worse.
For me, when I think about this piece, I think there's a really cool quote that I like. It's not to butcher it, but it's like, you can have anything you want, but you can't have everything you want, right? So it's like, in many ways, this piece is very much transferable to different societies and different time periods, and every society and every person, because we're all sort of confronted with these societal structures and who you're expected to be. And what if you want to go off the beaten path a little bit and chart your own way? Are you going to be held responsible for all of your mistakes in the past? And are you going to be able to overcome, who you've been, and maybe you've let people down, or maybe you've hurt people, can you redeem yourself, and are you obligated to? Can you continue to just live your life? And what does that mean for the people in your life? So in many ways, to me, it's relevant to everyone. And it's just, and as a dreamer, as a person who's always been like a big, I want to follow my dreams, and I want to encourage others to do that as well. You have a lot of that in this piece, of someone who is just trying to figure life out and figure out, is there something deeper? Maybe he's having, or maybe a person is having an existential um, crisis, or like what is there more? And I find myself in that space a lot, so I can relate to this, and I think a lot of people will, in on a lot of different ways.
Yeah, thank you for all of that. Finding this relevance and all of these points make me wonder if we can think maybe more specifically about your characters and the jobs that you're doing as we move through this process. Playing characters, British characters written in 1935, living in 1900. Playing those characters or directing actors who are playing those characters, does that present particular challenges or raise certain questions?
Yes and no. I mean, I'm gonna leap in here. Uh, I mean, I think it's interesting. Happily, and forgive me because her name is escaping me. Someone can please furnish it. We do have a dialect coach,
Barbara.
Barbara, and she's lovely and very skilled and very intuitive. Um, and one thing that I was talking about with her, I mean, one thing that I find true and that we were discussing, and that I think Alex would agree to, et cetera, is that the accent is not an impediment to the character. Like accent, like all of the sort of the trappings of the period are all integrated. It's all one. And if it's working, everything sort of supports each other. And so if it's, especially if it's well written, and it was interesting, I was working on my lines last night, and you know, I just thought about it. I was like, oh, well, I wouldn't say, um, now I'm gonna forget the line because I'm trying to say what it is. But I wouldn't say, oh, not a bit. I would say rarely or whatever, and it was like I never messed up the line again. I never put bit in there again because it was like, oh no, this woman would never, what would they say? What would they say at that time? How would people speak? And what makes sense with the cadence of the accent and all those sorts of things. Um, and and there's sort of a sort of a drama and a restraint to the British accent around 1900 that my character indulges in. That's really fun, darling.
One of the things I'll say is that, like, um, it is a challenge for me in that regard. But that's one of the things that really drew me to the project. Like, this is something that I don't think I can just show up and um, knock it out. Like, I'm gonna really have to go to work on this thing. Because when you think about it, it's like you may have, even if if you're an American and you're from New York, you're not gonna sound like someone from Boston. You're not gonna sound like someone from the South. So the specificity of that, RP, that time, um, that class, it's very specific, and to a trained ear, they're gonna, people will get that. So you want to do that justice, but also, it's also, they're just people, right? They're people, and they have the same sort of wants and desires and obstacles that people have. So I try to lead with that, like with those commonalities, and then figure out the fine tuning and the finishing touches as we go. But yeah, certainly having that dialect coach is super helpful, and just being around people that are really good at what they do, um, it helps you. It helps to, like, get your fire lit. Like, okay, um, we're 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 coming to do a play, but we're not coming to play. Like, this is serious, and people are on top of their game. So every day I show up to the space, I'm noticing growth, and, oh, I'm getting that more. I'm understanding that more. I get what they're saying more. Just character and character by character and moment by moment, um, the more we get to do it, the more I'm falling into it and getting a more sturdy foundation, to stand on. So the process has been great, both in rehearsal and zooming with Barbara and the whole bit.
Yeah, and I would just add too, Dexter, one thing that is sort of, it is interesting is, it's an intimate space.
Hmm.
And there's nowhere to hide. I mean, you're right there, the audience. And so, I mean, not that I suggest hiding on stage, but you can fudge it sometimes in a bigger room, or one can. I never do. And yeah, but this one really, you're right next to somebody always,
Sure.
right? I mean, you're all right there, which is beautiful. Like, that's the beauty of it. But when it comes to things like accent, mannerisms, all these sorts of things, mannerisms maybe has a bad connotation, but behavior, everything needs to be, I find that everything needs to be earned. And I do find that sometimes when I'm in the midst of sort of a Mrs. Bunting whirlwind, I have to remind myself, oh, really ask the question. To just like really remember to look at the other person, actor, character, and say, oh, what do you think? Like, what do you think? No, what do you, really ask the question, which is a very basic thing that we sometimes need to remind ourselves of. But I have found that there's such a sort of slurry of voice and manner. And then when I know that when we get corsets and dresses and everything, and I think that it's interesting too, I would actually be really interested if someone write a paper about this. My daughter was studying Jane Eyre recently, and there was this question of what are the different literary influences on it. And she was like, oh, it's the Gothic novel, it's this. And then the other was that it was melodrama, which was interesting. And then like romance. And I think, and I'm probably wrong on romance, but it's interesting because I also think that like Mrs. Bunting and Harry, they represent different periods, right? And so like, I mean, they are different ages. They're not from the same, it's like here, they're born in different times. And so he can actually brood and think about things and wonder about the state of the universe and make a choice. I don't think that Mrs. Bunting feels like she could ever do that. I have to keep up. I'm busy with, and it's like I think of my anyway, someone who's like a child of the 50s versus a child of the 60s. There's just like this total different mindset. One person's like, I'm going to go protest. The other one's like, I don't understand how you're not at work. Like, I don't understand, like, I literally don't understand how you get to just not go to your job. That was my dad, by the way. He was like, I don't understand. He happened to be on the campus at Berkeley in the 60s when he was like just out of the military, and he just like couldn't understand how everybody got the day off. Mm-hmm. Which seems square, but it was true. So anyway, I just think that it's interesting because I think there are sort of, Harry's he's much more romantic and much more sort of melodramatic. I don't want to play melodrama, but of that genre. It's interesting. Mm-hmm. And it's a little Gothic, right? There's a little Gothic in there. It's a good play. You should come see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I mean, I'm truly just enjoying. Even I'm just listening to you speak now, Laura. It's true. Like I have to almost remember some of the basics because I'm trying to think about things that I've never really had to think about before. Um, you know, not just the dialect or the cadence, but like you were saying, like even then. Um, very specific. We're very like a specific class of people, and we're very specific. Um, it's just it's a lot going on. We've got creatures from the sea. What do you call them? Elemental.
Elemental, yes.
You
They're made of
know,
the elements.
yeah, like and so just even just interacting with an elemental creature, and trying to figure that out, like there's just different things that I've not necessarily um, gotten the chance to do that are really exciting. So just but also, like I say, I just want to be grounded and do justice to um, my character's plight, because I feel like it's super relatable. It's super understandable. Um, if you've lived a life, you've probably, dealt with some of the kind of things that Harry's dealt with, although not necessarily a mermaid or a sea lady per se. Um, but yeah, it's just a lot to kind of take in, and then also remember, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be connect. Oh, I got to be listening. You asked me a question. It's not a rhetorical thing you said. I need to maybe think about that and give you a proper response.
Some really great points
Um,
about your characters and insights into the story. And all of them, they're such big ideas and such important ideas and questions. And I'm wondering if you had a takeaway or two that you'd want to leave an audience with, or that you would want to leave yourself taking away something in particular from this story. What would you say that would be?
I'll say one thing, of course, because I wanted to produce the play, and this has been important to me in a whole new way, since the shutdown and since the last couple of years we've been through. We call this a play as part of our awakening season, which I think is meaningful to a lot of us as we reckon with what the last few years have been like and what's going on in the world around us. What do we want to be more awake to, and what do we want to pay more attention to? Um, and for me, it has been a lot about really appreciating and valuing the people and the difference in people around me. Um, and so I want the audience to appreciate something that Dexter mentioned, in a very specific way. A lot of people, everyone in this cast is really good at what they do, and they're sharing their talent and their devotion and their passion with one another and with the audience. And I find that in itself perfectly consonant with the questions that the play raises about why we do what we do and how we make it from day to day, given that there are obstacles, and we have desires that don't always conform to the world that we're living in. And there are other options. There are ways of leaving that world. The best way of approaching that is to really be attentive and alive and appreciative of the people around us and all the different ways that we proceed through that world. So I think I want people to ask the real questions that the play asks about literally the meaning of life, and whether life as we live it is worth continuing, or is there something that might be leaving this life, because it does, kind of trigger warning here, it does raise that question: is life in this world um, the one that we embrace? But I'd like people to come away recognizing the affirmative choices that, although everyone makes different choices, that are possible, whether it's a specific choice that one character makes or the alternatives that the play brings up. So with a greater appreciation for our being together and our moving forward, in the world that we live in, however we may change it in the future. That's what I'd like to see.
just extemporaneous with this one. Um, I guess all of them have been. But I think something that Alex said led me to think about the idea of accepting. Like, I feel like we're in a space in this world now where acceptance is becoming more of a priority, right? And in a sense, I mean, not just accepting different people from different walks of life, but accepting perhaps either limitations or accepting the idea of like I'm gonna have to maybe go out there and go out on a limb for something that I believe in, and accepting everything that comes with that. Right? You may have a dream, and it may seem ridiculous to people, um, but there's something in you. There's something about like whatever's in your gut that you feel that kind of knows what you are and what you're supposed to explore in this world. Whether it's you want to create light because you're Thomas Edison, but nobody's seen light, so that sounds crazy. Or you need to go and be an opera singer, but you don't come from a town where people sing opera, so you don't know any opera singers. Um, to me, there's something in us naturally that if we listen to it, maybe it's like that inner voice. It kind of leads you in a direction that you probably should is probably worth exploring. Now you may lose friends on that journey, and you may lose yourself on that journey. So there's maybe like a way to do it that you don't go off a deep end, but maybe if it's worth going off, um, to me, like I said, I'm a dreamer, so I want to go for like my loftiest dream. I want to know what that feels like to, maybe have to eat tuna fish to survive every day, but I get to pursue my dream. And it's not always necessarily, you're going to see your friends maybe doing other things, and you start to question, like, well, my friends are doing it this way, or my father says I need to do this and study this in school. But to me, there's something to be said about a person who's willing to go out on a limb, because that's where all the fruit is.
That's really interesting what you said, Dexter. Actually, it got me thinking. I think it's interesting because I think there's sort of an overall societal shift away from just sort of labeling people lunatics, if they are going to um, go try to write the next big opera on plastic buckets, all of a sudden it's like, well, stomp, and everyone's like, oh, true. Especially if you can like point to a commercial success and everyone's like, oh, I don't know, go for it. But I think you're right. And then I think you also started to bring up family, because I think there's sort of, there are societal pressures, and then there are more intimate pressures, right? And then there are pressures we put on ourselves. So and I think that also, like, not everyone, this is going to sound maybe weird, I don't know what I'm going to say anyway. I don't know that everybody sort of has the same kind of fortitude, so like, I think in some ways Mrs. Bunting is stronger than Harry, right? In some ways she is. She's not going to be knocked off her block for anything, um that could also be stubbornness, but by the same token, she is not, she is at the whim of what she perceives other people to think of her. She's always sort of worrying about the perception and so on. So I just think it's interesting. I think it's interesting. I think that there is this sort of, I think it is a little bit of a cautionary tale, because I think I love that Harry maybe wants to go into the deep. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to give anything away, but right. Like, I mean, one thing that I think is fascinating that we've toyed with a little bit in this play is that people see in the mermaid what they want to see, and that she is a magical creature, but she's so good at it that we can't see that, right? And she even says at some point, isn't it interesting how we're so alike. Or she says something like, or you think we're so alike, but, and then she starts to trail off. And it's in this section where I keep asking her about like, well, but how do you eat down there? And what about electricity? You know, what do you do for, what do you wear? Whatever, you know, that's a different section. But so, and she, all these answers keep coming back and they're so odd. And she sort of says, isn't it funny how we're so alike? And yet, and it's like, it's that, and yet, and so I just think it's interesting because I think that in life we do that, right? That we don't need mermaids. I mean, I know, but like in love, whatever, you know, we see, we like to see ourselves reflected a certain way. We like to think certain things are possible for us, whatever. And so I just think that brings up some interesting things.
I love so much of what you just said because in so many ways, it's true, right? So the sea lady represents she, and it also alludes back to the acceptance thing. Like she could represent anything that's not within our tribe. She's not one of us, right? So we got to watch her. We don't know what she's capable of. But then on the other hand, it's like, oh wow, there's this new, pretty new, majestical being, creature, elemental, and it's really fascinating, and so it does draw a certain amount of attention from some people. So there's that, but then like you say, it's also a cautionary tale in a way. It is a cautionary tale, and that's to me where I was trying to get to of, you know, in some ways you kind of got to go for yours. Like you got a dream, you got to go for it. But in some ways, you might have some people in your life that are able to give you some decent advice, that are able to say, you know, maybe you going left, maybe you need to go right. Um, you know, so some of that you maybe take with a grain of salt, and how much of that do you got to go out on your own, you know, and stand on your own ideas and
Right.
desires. Um, it's kind of like, man, it's like an interesting balance to me. I think that's what's cool about this story. You can look at it, the same story, and take different things from it. Like in one way, it's like, man, but you know, I got to go for mine. But in some ways, it's like, oh, you know, is it worth that cost?
Well, and it was interesting, honestly, listening to you talk about sort of what the story meant to you. I was like, wow, that's a whole different play
Mm,
for your character. I was like, oh, that's like a whole different play from the
mm,
one I'm in.
mm-hmm.
Because those moments for you happen when you're alone, when I'm not there. Do you know what I
Sure.
mean? I mean,
Yeah,
which sounds obvious, but I was like, oh no, that's like that's why I brought up genre. I was like, that's like a whole different play.
sure.
Like this whole idea of like, I'm gonna look at my like who I am in the world and my past and how it's gonna come back and have I just have you know, am I my own person? Am I my family's person? All of these things, these sort of all of this introspection
That's not going on for you.
at all. Like, no. The pearls are pretty. I would like to
Right.
keep them.
Keep them
You
coming.
know, like it's a whole different level.
Keep them coming.
And I would posit, like equally important. I mean, deeply important to Mrs. Hunt, to me. I mean, it's not like I'm aware of the frivolity. I mean, it's really, I think I'm getting pleasure in a way I haven't gotten maybe ever, right? It is exciting and I feel good and I feel needed and important and special. I mean, I can't even remember. It means so much, right? Watch out for that.
Question.
Yeah.
I think the delight about directing for me and operating the theater is bringing the really talented, inspired, and different people together, um, and setting them in motion and seeing what happens and not being able to wrap it up afterwards, but rather we have such a remarkable group of really dedicated and um, uh, perspicacious people who are finding the kind of things that you found in it. And there are 10 actors and 15 characters, I guess. So lots of different perspectives on the world of the Sea Lady. I mean, the world of the play and what the Sea Lady brings into it, and everyone has a different reaction to her. I think that's some of the genius of the play. Neith Boyce took this story, which is great fun, but told twice removed. It's told by somebody who's a friend of somebody who is an outsider, who gets drawn into the story a little bit. And she managed to take that story and make it a very compelling collection of scenes between people who are intimately involved with real needs and desires and discoveries, when this creature from beyond, from some other world, from the sea, hurtles through their life like a meteor. And each one of them has a different challenge and attraction and fear and thrill of the encounter, and each of them negotiates it, but everybody has brought that so fully from their different perspectives, the way that you were describing it, Laura, that you live in a different play from Dexter, although Dexter absolutely identified, I think, Harry's quandary in a very real, meaningful way to us. So what I would wrap up is, the great thing is the play opens up all these possibilities because of the invested and gifted performances that are now coalescing into a thing that blossoms before our eyes, rather than being something that we can wrap up and put in a nutshell. But it's been just a real delight to, I'm just taking the metaphor, it's been a real delight to see it happen and see it continue to happen and become more interesting as the design elements and everything respond to what everyone is doing, and grow to something new in themselves. And I always hope that the audience, even though they're not a part of that whole process, experiences that same thrill and discovery through what we put together in our little intimate space. We really do pull them into the world we've created. And I think ideally they have that same experience that we do of inquiry and again discovery as it goes. That's my concluding thought.
Thank you all again for these insights and for joining us today. And thank you to viewers tuning in at home. We hope you've enjoyed this small peek at what's happening at Metropolitan this fall, and we hope you'll join us again in person this October. The Sea Lady runs from October 6th to October 30th, so get your tickets today at metropolitanplayhouse.org, and do remember that we still require our in-person audience members to be fully vaxxed and masked at all times in the building. We so look forward to seeing you there. In the meantime, and as always, be well, stay safe, and love one another.